Joe Zekas from YoChicago.com, New Homes Magazine. Sitting here with George Thrush, who's really an icon of Chicago real estate. George is celebrating his 80th birthday sometime soon, right?
November the 12th.
November the 12th, one day after Armistice Day.
Yeah.
Congratulations, George. You're in many ways a real survivor in the real estate business. Let me see if I can walk through a little bit of history with you. You came to Chicago when?
55.
Come straight out of college, or had you been?
No, I had a couple years experience, not in real estate, but was working a few years in Philadelphia.
And then you were with IBM somewhere?
I was with IBM.
In sales?
I was with IBM, and I came to Chicago out of IBM.
Were you transferred here by them?
Yeah.
You were one of those, I've been moved?
I've been moved. You got it. Well, I stayed with IBM. Actually, I joined IBM in 1957 and stayed with them for, I think my figures are right on that, for 19, let me get it right since I'm into it. Joined IBM in 1953.
Okay.
And I stayed with them 27 years.
Okay.
So I was with them I left IBM, resigned, early retirement from IBM in 1980.
You were with them through some of their greatest years.
Actually, that 1980 is exactly 27 years from today. You see, so I was with IBM 27 years.
27 years.
Now this is 27 years from the day year that I left them.
Almost breaking your life into equal thirds.
Yeah.
Third before you started IBM, a third there, and a third since.
I had been making some real estate investments, however, prior to leaving IBM, which the company was certainly aware of, and there was no problem. They were individual smaller investments in Lincoln Park. But
one of the ones I remember, because I remember when I moved to Chicago, George, it was 1974. I had just graduated from law school, and I looked and was very close to moving into an apartment in the 2000 block of Bissell. Armitage and Bissell. It was just north of Armitage on the east side of the street, and the west side of the street was a total war zone.
Correct.
It was all gangs and just crime, and if you crossed the street, it was like you were entering downtown Beirut. And you had gone into that area 7 or 8 years before that, right? In the late 60s, 67 or so?
Let me look at my notes here and see if I can tell you when that was. Because we've done some, when I was looking up some of these things in preparation for this discussion, I never realized how many developments we had done in so many places over such a long period of time. But to answer your question, our Bissell Street development was probably, I think, around 1967.
At that time, the area must have just been...
Does that make sense from your point of
view?
1967.
67 is what I recall, and the area must have just been horrible at that time.
Yeah, it was tough. It's interesting, there were gangs, and there were, as you probably know, very few, if any, African Americans in the area.
Puerto Ricans and...
There were Puerto Ricans and Appalachian gangs.
Yep.
And the main gang was Cha-Cha Jimenez's group, which was a pretty active group, although they were not as destructive as some of the gangs are today.
They were still selling drugs over in that area when I finally moved over there in 78.
Yeah.
And in 74, it was too rough for me to want to live there.
But I think, when you say they were selling drugs, a lot of it was marijuana. And I don't think it was anywhere near as dangerous in many respects as the bad areas are today with drugs. But we bought 7 row houses that backed up to the elevated track. And when I say backed up the elevated, I mean there may be 15
feet at most,
Right on
probably
them.
less, probably about 8 or 10 feet. Because these houses were built in 1875. And when the elevated was put in after that, they took off the rear 15 feet of the houses. You can still see the foundations under the L tracks.
Those are that's one of the most beautiful, for people who don't know the 2100 block of Bissell, it's one of the most beautiful blocks in the city.
Well, it's great architecture, and of course, it's one of the few blocks that there is symmetry, architectural symmetry on both sides of the street for the entire block. And all of them are double townhouses, except in the middle. And in the middle, on each side, there is a 3-unit townhouse, the middle of it being 4 stories high and the 2 side pieces being 3 stories high. But that's what attracted me to the block, its architectural character.
Had you had an interest in architecture before that? Had you been a buff of any kind, or just?
Well, I've always admired older urban buildings and urban areas and the people that live in them and their historical development. But I've never had any technical architectural experience or interest, really, in spite of the fact that 2 of my children are architects.